Today is Physio Monday. We've got Phil here, our resident physiotherapist, and we are going to be talking about strains, sprains, and warming up. And we've had a specific question here about the popliteus muscle. I hope I've said that right because I had to Google it. So stick around if you want to know more.
What's up, everyone? My name's Yanni Burmeister. I'm joined, as Rad said, with Phil White to my left, and across the table is Rad. Behind the mixer is Richie. Now, before we get started, I need to make it absolutely clear that Rad was the only one that needed to Google that. Richie actually knew it. But anyway, guys, look, what we should say before we dive into this, 'cause it's going to be an action-packed show. Anyone who's watching the live stream, let us know where you're tuning in from. And for anyone listening to the podcast or watching the replay on YouTube, if you want to join the crew that are watching us live and interacting live, especially for these Physio Mondays, because it's a great opportunity for you to ask questions about your body, your performance, injuries, injury management, everything really, anything about life. Phil's very smart. He knows a lot.
And I just want to jump in here before it goes on with like the popliteus. You know, it's a very specific, sounds like an obscure thing that, you know, you may not be relevant to you, but just remember that we're always looking to give like good principles about how to approach both your rehab and your training. So even if you don't have a popliteus issue yourself, there's still going to be interesting takeaways.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to interact live, jump over to Facebook, UMS Movement Mastermind. It's a private group, so you'll have to request to join. But everyone's welcome, and we'll get you in here and we can get chatting. So first up, Monday morning, brand new week. Big shout out to everyone who's jumped on and bought the phase 2 or version 2 of the 18-minute stretch routine. That has been going off like a
Firecracker?
A firecracker, yeah, I should say. And anyone who notices Rad has like a little bit of herpes on his bottom lip at the moment. It's not
this
herpes.
Is my good side. They can't see it.
Oh yeah, no, it's not herpes. It's actually a bruise from his son.
A scab from my son, from wrestling with my son and whacking my mouth on the edge of a
He's strong,
coffee
Keanu.
table.
He's little, but he's strong.
He jumps on you when you're not expecting
great
it.
left cross.
He got me. He got me.
Great left cross. Guys, yeah, we've had a very specific question come through, but anyone who is on the stream, if you've got anything related to physio, if you'd like to ask Phil a question just about life in general, then get it through. We will be scouring the comments for your questions. We also have a great question today about warming up in general and what is the best way to warm up for your workouts. That came through last week, and we're going to cover that one as well. But why don't we dive through and just build a little bit of context about the physio question today?
Yeah, so it's a question that came through from Luka. I've got it up here. Yep. Luka Dragojevic. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he says, "Hey, Yanni and Rad, was wondering if I could deal with this, what I could do to deal with this popliteus strain. I've had it a few months now, and a physical therapist, or a physio everywhere else in the world apart from America, just had me doing rehab right after it happened. Should I just rest for a few weeks to heal it, or does the healing process require that I engage in strength training to strengthen it and the muscles around it?"
Such a good question.
Good question.
Such a good question.
Yeah, and I think it's the first thing that really sticks out to me is that when you've gone and seen a physio and you say they've got you doing a rehab right after it happens, I think it's a really important thing when you do see a physio is ask them about the long-term plan. Like, don't just go there and get like a little sort of flare-up strategy. Ask about, you know, prognosis, how long it's likely to take to heal, and then try and get a plan that will graduate you from, you know, short-term rehab and into actual performance. Because I think it's a really key thing that people miss is that they just expect it to be like a turn up, car mechanic fixes it, go away. But really, with the body, it's all about getting the right adaptations to get back into your desired activities. So it's a bit hard here, obviously, like with these physio shows, I'm not doing an actual consultation. So this is more about sort of, you know, edutainment, the education and entertainment, where I'm just trying to help with principles. So please don't take this as specific medical advice. But I think the fact that you've had it for a few months now suggests that it's probably no longer a muscle tear issue. So that's really important to understand with people who have had muscle tears, that with a muscle tear, it, you know, depending on the grade, it will take up to generally about 6 weeks and to be fully done with a tear, and then from there it starts to become, if it's still causing issues, it's unlikely that it's still the tear that's the problem. Just to give a bit of information about what the popliteus actually is, it's a muscle in the back kind of lateral part of the knee, and its job is actually to control the tibia, so your shin bone, and control rotation, which helps with just the unlocking of your knee, because your knee looks like a hinge joint, so basically like a door hinge, just open and close, but it does have some funky little rotation things that help with stability of the knee, so you get like a little locking and unlocking of the knee as you go into sort of a straight knee, and that, like, it's a way of making it really efficient to stand, so you don't have to use as much muscular energy in standing, because the bones just sort of lock into place, and then because our body is super efficient, that's a way of just passively being able to hold that position without huge muscular input. And so when we start walking again from that straight knee, it's that popliteus that just helps with the internal rotation to unlock it and keep it going. So unless you've had like a pretty significant trauma, or you do some really particular like downhill running, and like often this kind of stuff comes in people who are doing serious like triathlon, long distance running, particularly when you start to get onto slopes, because it's all about loading through like a very straight knee. It's pretty unusual that it would be the popliteus. So it sounds like you've seen a physical therapist, but sometimes I think it can be a bit tempting for, even physios just be like, oh, it's the back of the knee, point to a structure. It might be that one, when really just remember, I've talked a bit about differential diagnosis before, but there are just so many things that can actually be going on, and the back of the knee is particularly complicated because you've got neurovascular structures, so your nerves and your veins that run through the back of your knee. You've also got something that Yanni's had a whole lot after his ACL tear, which you can get develop Baker's cysts. There's the hamstring attachments around there. There's the calf attachments crossing the knee joint as well. There's lateral meniscus. There's ligaments around there. So it's really complicated, and it's a hard one to get right. And so I'm just going to say that it might you say you've had a popliteus strain, but the fact that it's giving you grief a couple months later might be a good reason to get a second opinion on that. Yeah,
absolutely. Look, I love this question. I love how it's been framed, because it provides an opportunity for all three of us to give some real insight here. And Phil's gone really micro there on the function of the knee and the role of this tendon and that sort of thing, which is really, really good. And I think for Rad and I to give a little bit of value here, one of the key things that I've picked up from even the way this has been framed, this question, which I think we can provide insight for everybody, is Luke has written it here as though it's possibly not a good idea to run straight into a rehab program, and he sort of suggests here, should I just rest for a few weeks to heal it? And this is something that we talk about a lot, which is, the concept of motion being lotion and load management. And it's really interesting. I had a weekend away with a bunch of friends of mine who to play golf. And one of my closest friends back from high school has just had a knee arthroscopy for an old rugby injury that he did back in high school that had been giving him trouble for many, many years. And funnily enough, we got on conversation because one of the other friends that was there is married to a orthopedic surgeon, and they're very good. They're both very good friends with David Parker, who is the surgeon that did my knee reconstruction and also happened to do Benny's knee on May 29th. And we were talking about. He asked me for a little bit of rehab. Feedback on what he should do, and this was the first time he was playing golf since the knee reconstruction. He's a big golf player, and he went straight into, when we're having dinner, the things he can't do. He can't run anymore, he can't do this anymore, he can't do that anymore. And I'm like, whoa, hold on a minute, like what did you have done to the knee? And he said, just a little bit of a clean up. They shaved a little bit off my meniscus, the medial meniscus, and he had removed a little bit of old debris that was floating around in there and stuff like that. And I said, so why can't you run? And he said, I went for a 7K run just the other day, and it just blew up and it flared up. And I was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't go for a 7K run, but you definitely need some impact on the knee so it sort of continues to strengthen and develop the tissues. But the problem we all do is, like, he's an old rugby player. He used to, train at the gym really hard. So his mindset's still locked into how he would have approached his training years ago. And so he's gone out, the very first thing, he's mismanaged his load by running a super long way. And anyone's knee, if they haven't run for a long time and have a little issue, is going to blow up and feel pretty crap after that. So I spoke to him about the concept of progressive overload and load management and reintroducing load at a much slower pace and then slowly progressing from there. And, it was like I had said something revolutionary to him. He just totally missed that concept,
Yeah.
And I think this is something that we can provide a bit of insight here for Luca and anyone else who's listening and watching. Yes, it's really important that you go straight into a rehab program after an issue like this, and we've spoken about this a lot before. It takes quite a severe and a specific injury to not do any sort of rehab whatsoever. And to give you an example, after my knee reconstruction, I was doing rehab exercise 1 or 2 days later after I got admitted out of hospital. But it was very basic. It was muscular contraction stuff. I had to sit on the floor and tense my hammies, pull my foot into the floor, and then flex my quads.
They do a lot of that stuff like immediately post-op now. It's just like early loading is...
It's just straight up, And so what you should really be framing the question is, how should I manage load straight after this injury? And that's what I want to get you guys thinking about, because you should be going straight into a rehab program. That's the physio's done the absolute right thing there. But what we do as individuals is we really mess up the concept of load management when we do it on our own. And that's why it's so important that you, what Phil said is that you have a progressive program and make sure that your physio has a progressive approach where they're not just treating you once and saying do this, because so much can be missed in one consultation. So much can be convoluted. So much can be misunderstood. The physio might be having a really busy day and may just skip things that they should have reinforced. You never know. You just never know. It's one individual and people.
Yeah, my approach is always to if I can get one appointment, I want you to take away with a flare-up strategies. Well, basically know what it is. Be confident that you know what you can and you can't do. Have a flare-up strategy if it does get painful, and then have a plan about how to move forward. And I tell people, ideally, this is the only time I see you. And if your trajectory keeps going up and you keep getting better and everything just goes back to normal, then don't come back. Ideally, I do have just one treatment, but I've put in place that idea of having this sort of progressive trajectory. And if people can't figure out how to then, if it doesn't kind of goes upwards, or if it plateaus, or if it goes backwards, that's when I think it's a good idea to come back in and we can tweak things. But hopefully, I think.
And Rad had a really great point a couple of weeks, it was maybe just a week ago, we discussed this in our programming, to be flexible, to understand that it's not always going to go to plan, and you need to be a little bit open-minded and a little bit flexible and be smart. If you're doing something that's not feeling quite right, then be prepared to scale things back on the fly. But don't. And in my opinion, no, you should absolutely not have a couple of weeks rest, because that stipulates that you're not going to go to the gym at all. But remember, guys, irrespective of how serious this knee issue is, you got a whole body there, Luca, that you can train. And one of the most important strengths that we develop in the gym is the strength of habit. The habit of turning up to the gym and getting your workout done, and 2 weeks away from that, it can be devastating.
It's not. I think it even goes deeper than that. I think it's time that people start to look at their bodies in a different way and look at injuries in a different way. And an injury is such an amazing opportunity to be forced to take an insight into your body and the way things work. And we all invest. We all have 24 hours in a day. We all have 7 days in a week, and we all choose what we do with our time. And people spend a lot of time, in investing in learning about their career or their hobby or whatever their interests are, And then there's people out there that don't invest any time in self-development and education, and they invest their time in, watching Netflix or doing whatever. But when you have an injury, it's kind of wake-up call to say, all right, I need to start learning about my body. And your body is the only thing that you're going to have with you from birth to death. And you only get one of them. So I think it's a really important thing to not just take this cop-out approach of I'm just going to rest and do nothing and think that that's going to fix it. And if you don't understand exactly what it is that you need to do, then start learning. Because for me, Every time I had one of those injuries and I started to really invest in the learning process, you put those pieces together over time and you really start to understand your body and you start to understand how to deal with injuries. And injuries are a part of life. They're a part of training and they're a part of not training. If you don't train, you'll probably get injured at some stage. And if you do train, you'll probably get injured at some stage. So it's something that you have to develop a strategy for how you're going to deal with it when it happens all the time. And as we keep saying, the idea of should I just rest and do nothing, it doesn't. Not only is it not the best strategy for almost all injuries, but it is not a good strategy for life in general.
Yeah, and I'll link here we've talked about this peace and love approach, which is the kind of replacement that the British Journal of Sports Medicine has come up for the RICE protocol of rest, ice, compress, and elevate, where peace and love gives a bit more of a it's kind of realized that resting is not right, and they've even taken rest entirely out of it and they've replaced it with protect, where it talks about unloading it or restricting movement for 1 to 3 days to minimize bleeding, and then if there's other injury, it goes on here, and I'll link it here, but basically it's trying to take out that idea of that rest is the right thing for the body. And with peace and love, it really talks about optimal loading and education and optimism even about getting past this and vascularization, which comes down to a bit of light cardio exercise as well. So it's a real shift in the way that the science has been showing the best way to get past an acute injury. And I love that that the BJSM has taken rest out entirely. I think it's really a good message. Just a rule of thumb for people when looking at this question. He's saying, should I just rest it for a few weeks to heal it? Now, when you look at something he's had it for a few months now, the idea, if you've had something for a few months, then it's very unlikely that, rest now will suddenly become the thing that fixes it. Again, with the BDSM talking about protecting for 1 to 3 days after an acute injury, that's when you kind of give rest a solid go and then see if it comes back after an acute injury, but only for sort of 3 days. Whereas, for something that you've had for months, suddenly adding in a chunk of rest randomly a few months later,
it's not going to do anything. I mean, here's the thing. Phil's going light there. I'd say adding a chunk of rest in there is going to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, it'll make it.
It's going to make it worse, because Phil says this a lot, and this is something that I'd never really properly understood until we'd spent so much time together. Is that when you rest, guys, you lose strength very quickly in the big prime movers of your body. It only takes a week or two before you start to really drop off strength, and when your prime movers, when your big muscles that you can see and feel lose strength, then it creates more instability. And so if you've got a passive structure or a deeper injury that's not as superficial or surface based, then you're going to end up more vulnerable after taking that rest.
I'd even simplify and say not even only the prime movers, but all your muscles will become weaker and less active.
Yeah, that's right. So 9 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10, having a rest is the worst thing you can do, in my opinion. And that doesn't even include the fact that you're breaking a habit that may have taken you months and months and months to develop, and 2 weeks away from that habit. Anyone who's gone on a vacation for 2 weeks and not touched a gym or gone for a walk or done any intentional exercise knows how hard it is to pick that habit up again when you get home. It's tough, and so. Yeah, I would really try and avoid resting.
Yeah, and I like that Lucas seems to have kind of got a bit of an he's asking you whether or not he should rest, but then he goes on to say, does the healing process require that I engage in strength training and strengthen it and the muscles around it? And I think that's kind of good that you've kind of answered your own question
definitely.
there. Yeah. Where it really does come down to building support around that knee joint, whether or not it is the popliteus itself or another structure around it. Structures like these structures within joints generally get aggravated when you have poor control, and particularly with the if it is a popliteus strain, it usually comes down to an inability to kind of control your distal limb, which basically means the parts past your knee joint. If you've got a lot of excess sort of movement there from a lack of muscular control, then the popliteus has to do more job in the sort of unlocking and stabilizing of the knee joint. So the more you can be working on sort of single leg stuff that challenges not only the balance around the ankle, the knee, and the hip in a sort of dynamic way, and obviously you'd grade that from doing standing on one leg on flat ground to adding in either heel raises or adding an unstable ground, all these kind of classic sort of progressive rehab principles. But then I think it is so important to then realize that it's not only just going to be these little balance proprioceptive things, it's going to be strengthening your calves, your hamstrings, your quads, all the muscles that cross over the knee joint and add hugely to the dynamic stability of that joint. Because again, when we think about the knee and we've got like all the ligaments around it, we've got the cartilage in there, all of these passive structures, the bursts are there, all as they're kind of your backup mechanisms for support. And if we can unload them by using our active structures as our real dynamic active stability structures, then your joints are going to be happier.
Yeah, perfect.
So let's move on to Ben's question.
Just really quickly, with stuff with the back of the knee, I'd kind of briefly mentioned the differential diagnosis importance before, but I think it's worth just one that people sometimes miss and forget with the back of knee and calf pain is a deep vein thrombosis and blood clots.
Yep.
So I just want to kind of flag that for people who have pain around there, and it's not always in people after they've flown or old people or really unfit people. One of my best mates who's one of the strongest and fittest guys I know, he just happens to have a genetic predisposition to a higher likelihood of blood clots, and he's had about 7 blood clots in his calf and foot over the last 5 years, and he's one of the healthiest guys I know.
So you do want to get it diagnosed properly.
Yep, awesome. So morning to Jada, Lee and Dave. Thanks for tuning in and commenting. Anyone else that's live, give us a little comment so we can give you a shout out. So Ben Lodge, who is definitely one of the strongest people I've seen post in this group, because he's showing us that his eccentric one-arm pull-ups, which is a seriously impressive feat of strength. He's asked some really good questions here, some higher level stuff. He's saying, hi, I'm enjoying the Foundations program. I want to flag that for a second. Someone that's doing some of the highest level strength training in our group, one-arm pull-ups, is saying that he's enjoying the Foundations program. It is for everyone. It is not for beginners. Everyone is going to benefit from that program. So, hi, I'm enjoying the Foundations.
Ben's tuning in live to watch. So
yeah, awesome. What specific warm-up do you do for weighted work, and do you have any recommendations for warming up for bodyweight exercises? So first thing I'll say, Ben, is the UMS warm-up that's in the Foundations program is the best warm-up we've ever come across. It's the most efficient, but then once you finish the warm-up, how do you warm up for weighted work? We do what's called a 4-3-2-1 warm-up, which means if you know what weight you're going to lift for your first set, let's say you're going to do 50 kilos on whatever it is, a bench press or something. You take 50% of that and you do 4 reps, then you go 70% for 3 reps, then 90% for 2 reps, and then 100% for 1 rep. So what that would look like, you don't have to get a calculator out. Do 20, if you're going to do 50 kilos for your first set, do 25 kilos for 4, do 35 for 3, do 45 for 2, and then do 50 for 1.
Yeah.
As far as
what that does is it not only prepares the muscles and the tissue, it primes the nervous system really nicely.
Yep.
And there is even a great argument that if you're doing like a 5 RM set, that you can go over your 5 RM weight for the 1 rep, which so primes the that's right. It primes the nervous system above and beyond what you're planning to lift, which makes the 5 RM feel a lot easier.
Yep. And if you're doing, on the other hand, if you're doing something quite light, if you're doing an easy work, you don't even need to do a 4-3-2-1. You can do like a 4-2-1. So you can go like 50%, then 80%, then 100%, and like that.
The really important thing I want to add there before Rad races on is that these warm-up reps, we said this last week, and I'm going to say it again because it's an important beat to keep listening to, is every single rep should look like your maximum rep. And that 4-3-2-1, not only does it prepare the body for this workout, it just engages in more repetition of the movement that you need to do thousands of times to master. So make sure when you're doing that 4-3-2-1 warm-up sequence that you are practicing, you're rehearsing the maximal load every single time, and it should look identical every rep from start to finish.
Yeah, our friend Sebastian Orb, on aka Australian strength coach, who can squat well over 300 kilograms, but he does his first
360,
375,
375. Yeah, one of the strongest men in the world, and when he does his first warm-up set on a squat of 20 kilos, he puts the same intensity and the same effort and the same focus on as though he was doing 360 kilos. It's quite amazing to watch him do it. And he warms up totally differently to us. He does a powerlifting warm-up, which is he just basically goes straight
when you're
into
lifting
squatting.
that sort of weight, it takes a long time.
But what I mean is he doesn't do a 10-minute mobility
and
routine like we do.
It's also more than just the movements as well, where like he's one of the kind of nicest easy going guys I know. when he's not lifting.
Yep.
But during a workout, like I remember when I was training at his gym a lot, I'd like look in the window and see if he was training, then I'd be like, I'll come back later.
Yeah.
Because like he just
can't.
really gets in a zone and puts not only the same sort of physical intensity into getting the right positions and doing the tempo and all the stuff we've talked about, but also just is like using that time to really get in that mindset of performance and using that intensity in the actual like mental side of the movement, which makes kind of sense in that idea of using like activating your nervous system as well. So I think that's just a kind of interesting thing to think about as well for someone who is doing like higher level stuff and you really want to hit PBs, like take that on board as well as an opportunity.
Yeah. So Ben said, if I skip down through his question, he said, so for bodyweight specific exercises, I do a warm-up as a regressed bodyweight movement equivalent to about 50 to 60% of intensity for 7 reps. Yes and no. You will absolutely, you choose a bodyweight specific movement that is of a lower intensity that you can do, but I would only do about 40% intensity and I would never do more than 4 reps. Remember that, like, it doesn't matter, like as soon as you get above that 4 rep range, you start moving into the fatigue zone, and a warm-up shouldn't fatigue you, a warm-up should prepare you. So Ben, just for the bodyweight exercises, just lower the intensity and the volume a little bit.
Yeah, and bodyweight exercises are often very skill-based, and for skill-based, you do not want to drag fatigue into the workout. Remember, the warm-up is not the workout. Try and get it done quickly, efficiently, and then get stuck into your workout.
Yep. So you've said here, so for those bodyweight eccentric one-arm pull-ups, he's saying I would warm up with 1 set of 7 perfect chin-ups. What I would do is I would warm up with 1 set of 4 perfect chin-ups, and then potentially, because you're a very strong dude, potentially even go to a pronated grip and then just do like 1 or 2 so that that would replicate going up in difficulty before you go to your eccentrics. And then we're saying, he's saying, with weighted stuff in foundations, because I'm just starting and the weights are low, I've been getting away with 1 set of 5 reps at 50%. Okay, so we've spoken about this. This is the warm-up rounds. It's a long question. I'm just looking through here. Okay, so final question. What do you do for a cool down? Is the 18-minute stretching routine at half or relevant static stretches for the muscles worked in the session? I could do active recovery for areas that weren't hammered, like doing the lower body warm-up, mobility as a cool down, and upper body days, and vice versa. So that's a really good question. The 18-minute stretching routine in full is what I would do for a cool down. And I'm going to do a shameless plug here because this is the honest to God truth, guys. This is why it was created. The 18-minute stretching routine version 2 is exactly what I do for my cool down. And the reason why the 18, now let me make this very clear. If you've got the 18-minute stretching routine, that is an amazing cool down. It is very, very good. But the 18-minute stretching routine version 2, the reason why I created it is because it has a bigger focus on the main gymnastics skills movements that everybody's working towards, the front splits, middle splits, pancake, and back bridge. So that's what I do now for my cool down. It's perfect. It's really, really good.
My opinion is that for a cool down, it really comes down to how much time you've got.
Yep.
You can almost do anything, and it's a great time to do a bit of stretching and mobility work because you're nice and warm, your body's nice and warm, and it really depends on how much time you've got.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say that like cool downs are sort of this sort of funny thing in the world that are just like it's kind of expected that you do something, but really like it's a bit of an unknown. And from my own experience of like it kind of matters more about the intensity I've done the workout, about how sore I am the next day, rather than what I've done afterwards. And I think doing a cool down like Rad was talking about there is the 18-minute stretch routine. If your goal is flexibility and mobility, like absolutely like set aside the time to do that. But if your goal is more about just getting sort of your basic sort of stuff ticked off, I wouldn't cut out 15 minutes of your workout to put that cool down in.
Absolutely.
Like make sure you follow through with your strength stuff. If your cardio is important, do your cardio.
And we don't, none of us cool down except like when we do our strength training sessions, we do our last set and then finish and then go straight back into work. I think cooling down is probably more relevant if you're doing really high intensity type cardio type work.
This is a cool down. Let's be absolutely clear. The concept of a cool down comes from athletic performance, sports, when you're competing, and the most practical example is when you've got to back up, when you've got to compete again. quickly. The turnover is very quick, and it's about minimizing the amount of lactate that remains in the body. So what they're trying to do in a cool down is they keep the blood flowing for a prolonged period and just really help with that recovery process. So they have cool down pools for swimmers, and they put you on a cycle if you're a runner or a stationary bike or something like that, if you're a football player or something like that, because they want to be able to turn up to training the next day. Now, what you got to understand, what you got to remember is these athletes that are performing, they're competing, they're going to absolute maximum capacity every time they compete. So they're really stressing their body. We do not replicate that in the gym, and we do not recommend replicating that in the gym because you don't have to. There's no point. You don't have to take your body to that absolute limit because there are risks associated with doing so.
Yep.
We
You'll
train to
slow your progress.
That's exactly right. We recommend training to 70 or 80% maximum, and then do that more frequently. And when you do that, there's not as much need for a cool down. We do it to maintain our flexibility so that we don't feel stiff the next day. And I honestly, I don't think we need to worry too much about it. Yep. What Phil said is absolutely bang on. People may get confused. People may get confused and think, oh, geez, I need to do a cool down, so therefore I won't do this last set. Absolutely don't do that. Yeah.
Cool, guys.
There is just one question that we said we would answer today, which is James on the online coaching group. And it's about the hip rehab program. And he wanted to know if it's okay to do the hip rehab stretches more often or to stick with the program of 2 days per week. So when it comes to basically all stretching stuff that we talk about, if you're looking to develop flexibility in one area, do it. Treat it like a strength workout, do it in a strong, a really targeted sort of fashion. If you want to do it more than that, just keep it light, keep it gentle, explore those range of motions, but don't push it super far. And with hip rehab, I'd really focus, again, mostly on the strength side of things rather than stretching, because we want to build dynamic stability around the hip joint, not make it extra mobile, because then we have to control it more.
Very, very quickly before we go, can we give Jada Goodwin Crosby an answer? Because she's jumped on the live.
I was.
So she's saying here, I had a tear in my TFCC around March. It was
just a bit of cartilage around your wrist.
Yep. It was painful at the time. I think it's healed as it no longer is painful, but it still pops when I twist my wrist. Is this something I should be concerned with?
Yeah, wrists are bloody annoying structures where I've had this wrist injury since I was 12, and it just really limits my range, flares up, is really painful sometimes. They're one of those things that it is so hard to get load management right because we use them constantly all the time. I think the fact that it is no longer painful is great news. And with the popping, again, without sort of assessing it myself, can't give you a total answer, but I think a good rule of thumb with people often are wondering if clicking and cracking and all those things are okay or not. And generally, the body will have clicks and cracks, and it's totally fine if that remains sort of pain-free and it doesn't get more painful the more you do it, and you don't get kind of locking in certain positions. So that would be the thing that I'd kind of keep an eye out for. If you're able to load it till the cows come home, and it doesn't progressively get more painful and it doesn't lock into different places, then should be fine. But yeah, I'd still take if you've had time out in March and you've just been building it up, I'd still just take a really progressive approach to it and don't rush it.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, you said something to me once, because I've got this clicking in my elbow that's been really annoying, and you spoke about the fact that there are certain structures in the body that are designed to help align tendons, and sometimes when you injure yourself, you displace or remove one of those, and then your tendons, although they're not damaged, they don't perfectly line up when you're moving, and they can create little pops and jumps and
they just flick over other structures that sometimes they don't.
And that's quite common in the arms, in the elbows, in the wrists,
and ankles. I've had that, and it's not something that it's just kind of doesn't cause.
You can't fix it, so there's no point worrying about it. Now, there's one more very, very important thing that we bring up today, and that is that Phil turned 30 on the weekend.
Yay.
Stop it.
Yeah, decade birthday. So everyone, please join me in wishing Phil a happy birthday.
Thanks, guys.
We're about to go and completely blow our calorie intake for the day with a birthday cake.
Hey.
Happy birthday, Phil. Thank you very much for everything that you bring.
Oh, mate.
Here's to another 30 years. Hopefully here on the show.
All right, see you guys.
All right, guys, have a great day. Bye-bye. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, that's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image. Direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body